This will be a loud, potentially dangerous night in much of the country. Have a look. Thunderstorms, some severe, are possible for 195 million people from west to east. It's a system that has brought heavy downpours this week in parts of the east, sent temperatures plummeting in the Midwest, and worsened the drought in the west. We have a series of reports. First, Jamie Yukas.
Severe thunderstorms tore through parts of Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey, and New York this afternoon. Flash flood warnings have been posted, with some areas expecting as much as 3 inches of rain. The storms ran along the eastern edge of a bubble of cold air that's dropped over the Midwest. Kansas City, St. Louis, and Chicago usually have highs in the 80s this time of year. This afternoon, they were in the 60s and 70s. That's more than 15 degrees below normal. This is typically the hottest week of the year in the Minneapolis area, but Chris Wybe, who runs a city pool, says attendance is down 20%.
Normally our concession stand will have a line of 10 to 15 people for 4 hours straight, and we'll also have all our lounge chairs taken. You barely get a chair. It's just night and day difference from what we're seeing in the last couple of weeks.
And fans here at the Major League Baseball All-Star Game have been swapping out T-shirts for sweatshirts, Scott. Lows are supposed to dip into the 50s, meaning it's probably better weather for a football tailgate than a midsummer classic.
Israel is reporting its first death today in the week-long lopsided battle with Palestinians in Gaza. 15 Israelis have been wounded by unguided rockets fired by Islamic militants. Israel's air campaign has killed 194 Palestinians, mostly civilians, and wounded more than 1,400. The 32-mile Gaza Strip began in 1948 as a homeland for Palestinians displaced by the creation of Israel. Early today, Israel started a ceasefire, but Gaza kept shooting, and Holly Williams is there.
As usual in this decades-long conflict, both sides blame each other for the failure of the ceasefire.
We are not against ceasefire.
Fawzi Barhoum is a spokesman for Hamas, the militant group that controls the Gaza Strip. He told us there'll be no ceasefire until Israel ends its airstrikes. Why does Israel have to stop fighting first? Why is it up to them?
Because the occupation began the war first, and they are targeting the civilians.
And the militants say stopping the airstrikes is just the beginning. They'll only agree to a ceasefire that also ends the blockade imposed by Israel 7 years ago, which has sealed off Gaza and deprived Palestinians here of necessities like fuel and cement.
Israel says the purpose of the blockade is to stop attacks by militants, but it's also hurting ordinary Palestinians because the economy here is in tatters.
At the Roma taxi station in Gaza City today, there were plenty of drivers, but no work. Jamal Al-Adam told us he earns a tenth of what he made before the blockade, can't pay for his son's education, and struggles to put food on the table. We want a ceasefire, he told us, but it has to be a real ceasefire. We want the blockade removed, the borders open, and we want to be able to earn a living.
After Israel suffered its first death during this escalation today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to expand the Israeli offensive. But Scott, here in Gaza, Hamas's military wing has also been making new threats, warning that its attacks will increase in ferocity and intensity.
Holly Williams in Gaza City. Holly, thank you. Last night, the head of the Veterans Benefits Administration was excoriated by a congressional committee investigating a backlog of hundreds of thousands of vets who are waiting for disability checks. The VA's credibility was called into question, and here's Wyatt Andrews.
There's some pretty derogatory comments that are on this.
Distrust and bad blood have been building between the VA and the House Veterans Affairs Committee, and last night it boiled over. The committee chairman, Republican Congressman Jeff Miller, produced a memo in which a VA official in Philadelphia tells subordinates to ignore Rory Riley, a committee investigator who was visiting the office unannounced. The memo scorns Riley's arrogance and includes a crude personal insult.
And you're telling me this person is still employed, even though she gave a directive to not tell an agent of this committee what was happening at the regional office?
Allison Hickey, the chief of the VA's benefits division, tried to apologize.
Without question, we respect the oversight of every single one of you on this committee.
Hickey was at this hearing to report the VA's progress in reducing the backlog of veteran disability claims, a record 1.2 million claims. But just before that, claims processor Kristen Rule testified that some of the claims reporting had been falsified. Rule also said she found 96 boxes of documents mailed in by veterans that should have been filed, but which were marked to be shredded. Chairman Miller accused the VA of deception.
There is not a corner of VBA leadership that will not cut, nor a statistic that they will not manipulate to lay claim to a hollow victory.
This time, Hickey pushed back forcefully, saying her progress report was accurate.
I want every veteran in this country and all of you to believe us when we say we're making good decisions, not because of us, but because we care so much about those veterans.
Insiders believe that the VA is making some progress with the claims backlog, but another major investigation is now looking at how the VA handles its claims data. Scott, when the VA's Assistant Inspector General was asked last night if she trusted the VA's figures, she said no.
Atlantic City is known for its monopoly on casino gambling in New Jersey and for the street names that it lent to the game Monopoly. But AC is losing the real-life game. The Trump Plaza Casino just told employees that it's shutting down in September. Michelle Miller tells us Trump is just the latest player on the boardwalk to fold.
First, it was the Atlantic Club. Then in June, Caesars Entertainment announced it was shutting the Showboat. And Revel, the 2-year-old Las Vegas-style mega casino, which has never turned a profit, is filing for bankruptcy. Now it's the Trump Plaza. Together, those casinos make up more than 6,000 jobs, 20% of the workforce. Melanie Gillespie has been a cocktail waitress at the Showboat for 18 years. She's already been warned she could be laid off by the end of August. If that happens, what do you do?
Well, I have to do something. I have a daughter to raise, and we need health benefits, so I'm willing to do whatever I have to make sure that my family, stays afloat.
Don Guardian is Atlantic City's mayor. Over the course of 7 months, you losing 3,000 plus jobs.
3,000 jobs, and we're only going to be replacing them with about 600, 700 jobs in the next year.
That's devastating.
That is very, very hurtful. People that are in it have really suffered.
When legalized in 1976, gambling was supposed to reclaim the allure of New Jersey's boardwalk empire. But competition from online gaming and out-of-state casinos like New York's Empire City has hurt Atlantic City's bottom line. 35 casinos are within driving distance of New Jersey. Atlantic City's casino revenue has plunged from a high of $5.2 billion in 2006 to just $2.9 billion last year. The mayor says the key to a comeback is diversity, providing more entertainment options than just gambling. Las Vegas did that a decade ago. Now gaming accounts for less than half of its overall tourism dollars.
The battle over illegal immigration shifted today to Oracle, Arizona, north of Tucson. The federal government intends to house 40 immigrant children there. Protesters for and against squared off. In Washington, 2 lawmakers from Texas introduced a bill aimed at stopping Central Americans from sending their children to the U.S. border. Nancy Cordes is at the Capitol for us tonight. And Nancy, what would this bill do?
Well, Scott, it would call for unaccompanied minors who come here from Central America to be treated more like minors who come here alone from Mexico. Once they cross the border and they're detained, they would see a judge within 7 days. And if that judge determines that they don't have a legal case to be here, they aren't, for example, victims of human trafficking, then they would be sent home right away. The bill was introduced by Republican John Cornyn and Democrat Henry Cuellar, but so far it is mainly getting support from the right. Many Democrats arguing that 7 days really isn't enough time for these children to make the case that they belong here when they don't speak the language and often don't have legal representation. In fact, I asked the leader of the Senate, Harry Reid, how he feels about the plan this afternoon. He says he doesn't support it, which is a troubling sign for the legislation, Scott.
And Nancy, there was an interesting development this afternoon. One of the immigration movement's most visible activists, Jose Antonio Vargas, was detained in Texas. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. What can you tell us?
Well, Vargas had gone to McAllen, Texas for a vigil and a press conference, and when he went to the airport to head home, he didn't have a valid U.S. visa, and so he was detained by Customs and Border Patrol. McAllen is so close to the U.S.-Mexico border that all the roads and the airports out of the city have customs checkpoints, and Vargas, who was brought to the U.S. from the Philippines when he was 12, says he wasn't aware of that when he went down there. Critics are calling it a publicity stunt. Either way, we learned a short time ago that he has been released by federal authorities, Scott.
Released and waiting for a detention hearing at a later time. Nancy, thank you very much. Taking pictures has never been easier, just point and shoot. But today, Elizabeth Palmer brought us a new way. No hands. It's all in the mind's eye.
What we have here is this is the EEG device. So this is what actually reads the signals from your brain.
The basic hardware for mind control turns out to be a headset that costs $80, some software, and a pair of Google glasses. With this, I should be able to take a picture just by thinking.
I feel like I'm taking an exam.
Yeah, it does feel a little daunting the first time you put it on.
Ben Aldred and Chloe Curtin work for a London software company called This Place. They were intrigued by the tiny camera in Google Glass that's normally activated either by touch or by voice. But they wondered, could it be triggered by brain power alone?
Literally your brain waves, and those signals are higher if you're concentrating, and they are lower if you're relaxing.
In the company's video, a woman looks at some graffiti through Google Glass. As she concentrates on an idea, it could be any idea, a white line moves up to the top of the image and she actually triggers the camera with her brainwaves. Science has known all about these waves since the electroencephalogram, or EEG, was invented in the 1920s. But it's only recently that researchers have harnessed them to control prosthetic limbs, wheelchairs, and even computer games.
This side slips underneath the device and this side slips over it.
Okay.
Now it was my turn to demonstrate mind over matter.
I see you.
Yeah.
On television.
Right now, concentrate.
So I think I'll try and take a picture of our cameraman.
Okay.
All right.
Brilliant.
Okay. So I faced him and started thinking hard and even harder until...
Yes, I did it.
The team here believes this software can change lives, and they've made it public so developers around the world can brainstorm with them.
Severe drought is forcing California farmers to idle hundreds of thousands of acres this year. That will cost the state economy more than $2 billion. But people all over America will pay a price. And here's Carter Evans.
Nearly half of the nation's vegetables, fruit, and nuts are grown in California's Central Valley. Today's report estimates 17,000 farm jobs could be lost as more than 620 square miles of farmland will go unplanted this year. Restaurant owner Lior Hillel is already seeing the results. Give me an idea of how much your food prices are going up.
I would say about 25%. Tomatoes went up tremendously. We're looking about If you used to buy a case of 25 pounds for about $10, today we're looking about $15, $16, $17.
He's already cut staff at his restaurant, Bacaro LA, to keep menu prices from rising. How long can you go before you're forced to raise prices?
We're almost there, unfortunately.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture expects produce prices to rise by up to 5% this year, adding $500 to the average American family's grocery bill. Californians also learned today they could face tighter water restrictions, including bans on excess lawn watering, washing cars without a hose shutoff nozzle, and spraying down sidewalks. Violators would be fined $500. Marty Adams is with LA's Department of Water and Power.
This coming fall, if we don't see rainfall and we don't have some winter storms coming in, we may see, a heavy hand coming from the state.
As we mentioned earlier, baseball's All-Star game is being played this evening in chilly Minneapolis. We'll end tonight with a former player who never made it to the majors, but wound up playing a bigger role in the game than he could have ever imagined. Here's Vanita Nair.
Pete Tucci has a batting cage attached to his office. This is where he's always felt the most comfortable. 11 years ago, he was a power hitter in the minor leagues, playing for the Toronto Blue Jays organization. But a broken bone in his hand forced him to quit. Amy Tucci is his wife.
He was like a fish out of water. Without baseball in his life, he was miserable.
To cheer him up, she bought him a lathe, a woodworking machine she read about online.
I looked at her and said, "What in the world makes you think I can make a baseball bat?"
So the first time you're in the garage with no experience and the machine and the tools, was it a nightmare?
It took me a while to figure out, but once I made it like the first one, I was kind of hooked.
Is this how a bat starts off?
This is how it gets shipped to us. So
5 years after making that first bat, Tucci Lumber will produce 20,000 this year. Each bat costs between $80 and $150 and is custom cut to mirror a player's proportions.
We probably have close to 1,000 different models.
Amy paints each one and applies the logo she designed.
Had you ever painted anything before?
Nope, never.
Once he saw your work, though,
I think I kind of cooked my own goose because now I actually love it.
The dominant competition, Louisville Slugger, makes close to 3 million bats a year. But this year, 161 pro players are buying from Tucci. Houston Astro Jose Altuve will be playing with one in tonight's All-Star game.
Now I kind of feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and maybe my entire life of being in baseball actually kind of landed me here, and this is what it was all about.
And Tucci still feels like he's taking a turn at bat.
After 3 rounds of nuclear talks, the Iranian foreign minister and the U.S. Secretary of State described the negotiations as positive, but say greater effort has to be made toward a final deal. Mohammad Javad Zarif says Tehran is seeking to end a deadlock built on an illogical framework. He says Washington needs to make a political decision to help break the stalemate. He's urged serious, lower-level talks. Meanwhile, Kerry says some progress was made during the talks, but there are still, quote, very real gaps between the two sides. He added that the Iranians are strong in their positions. The Iranian negotiating team has been in talks with the P5+1 group since the 2nd of July to draft a comprehensive nuclear agreement. Earlier we talked with our correspondent in Vienna, Serena Shim, about the ongoing nuclear negotiations between Iran and the P5+1 ahead of the July 20th deadline for a comprehensive deal.
It seems from the rhetoric that we heard from the U.S. Secretary of State that he is really trying to tone down and de-escalate any tensions that, there may have been between the West and Iran previously. We even heard him, he made a statement directly to the supreme leader of Iran saying that we take it very seriously, that the U.S. takes it very seriously, that that a fatwa was issued against nuclear weapons, but that they want to see some more progress. That he also said that he reiterated several amounts of times that he felt that progress was made and that negotiations were serious and that all parties who attended the negotiations stuck to their commitments. So we weren't hearing any ratcheting up of rhetoric or any bad-mouthing any parties from either side. And right now we're expecting that the Iranian foreign minister might make his way over here. We haven't heard anything officially, but we're expecting that he might have a comment as well, might talk in front of the press, say what their side is. But when it came to the U.S. Secretary of State really getting into details and where the problems really lie, he said that he was going to keep the negotiations in the negotiating room. He did say that he is getting on a plane right now to head over to Washington and to discuss the issue with U.S. President Barack Obama. So, and he was actually asked, the question whether or not is there a realistic idea that you're going to be able to reach this deadline by the 20th. Basically let us know, let the public know if you don't think that it's going to be reached. He said, no, we really are working towards it. And if anything happens, I can be back here. He also said that he has a delegation here. He has some of his team here. And then, of course, the High Representative for the EU, Catherine Ashton, is here, along with the Iranian foreign minister. But everybody, basically thinks that they're going to take us right to that point, to the 20th, and then say that there's going to be an extension.
2 people have been killed as a fighter jet crashes in southern Iran. A senior Iranian military officer says the pilot and co-pilot died after the F-4 Phantom jet went down before noon. He says the plane crashed after it took off from an airbase in the southern city of Shiraz. The military plane was on a training mission at the time. Officials are investigating the cause of the incident. Unilateral sanctions imposed by Western countries ban Iran from buying spare parts for its military and civilian aircraft.
There are great risks in what is happening there and in the potential of an even greater escalation of violence. We don't want to see that. Nobody does, nor does Israel. But Israel has a right to defend itself. And it is important for Hamas not to be provoking and purposefully trying to play politics in order to gain greater followers for its opposition and use the innocent lives of civilians whom they hide in buildings and use as shields and put in danger. Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, China, and Iran.
At least 15 people have been killed in Moscow after a subway train derailed during the morning rush hour. Emergency officials say at least 120 people were injured. 50 of them are in a serious condition. Several cars left the track in the tunnel after a power surge triggered an alarm which caused the train to stop abruptly. About 200 people were evacuated from the Park Pobedi station, but one person is reportedly still trapped in the wrecked car. Park Pobedi station is the deepest subway station in Moscow at 83 meters below street level, making the rescue particularly hard. And we can bring you an update on this. We're joined on the phone by Anya Ardayeva, our correspondent there in Moscow. Thanks for being with us, Anya. Have you got any updates on these casualty figures, and what's the latest as far as the rescue and evacuation efforts are concerned?
I certainly do, and according to the Russian deputy mayor, Piotr Birukov, at least 15 people died and more than 118 were hospitalized following that crash in Moscow, with a total of 150 people injured. Birukov said that this casualty figure is going to change most likely within the next hour. He said 12 bodies have been recovered, adding that the train's driver survived the crash, and he was in the hospital. This is contradicting earlier reports that the train's driver was dead, and hopefully, if he is indeed alive, according to the deputy mayor, he can provide more info about what exactly happened this morning during rush hour. and all of the people who died in this incident were reportedly traveling in the first car of the train when, according to investigators, a power source reportedly triggered some sort of alarm, and that caused the train to stop abruptly, and that resulted in the derailment of several train cars. The deputy mayor also said that the incident was not investigated as a terrorist attack, and that terrorism was absolutely excluded in this case, and a criminal investigation into a violation of safety rules was now opened by the Russian prosecutors.
Our top story this hour, the Israeli military resumes its deadly offensives on the impoverished Gaza Strip after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu orders more assaults on the besieged territory. The military earlier said it halted its airstrikes for some 6 hours. Plumes of heavy smoke could be seen rising over the coastal strip. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, the death toll from 8 days of Israeli airstrikes has mounted to 193. A further 1,400 Gazans have also been injured. Since last Tuesday, Israeli warplanes have struck more than 1,300 targets across Gaza, which is home to around 1.8 million Palestinians. Medical sources say the number of fatalities has already exceeded the death toll from the 2012 conflict. Meanwhile, Israeli troops and tanks remain amassed on the Gaza border in preparation for a possible ground assault.
Rogelio. Cada uno de estos casos ha sido previamente analizado según lo hemos conversado.
Each one of these cases has been analyzed by authorities. The people who arrived today have already gone through the legal process in the U.S.
Cualquier proceso pendiente ya estaba concluido. Han habido ya algunos resultados concretos.
There have been concrete results. Some of those traveling with unauthorized minors have been detained, and we are still working on that.
Vamos a iniciar también una campaña publicitaria que
We will launch an ad campaign to prevent families from sending their children due to the dangers that it entails.
por los riesgos que eso significa.